Hello you beautiful people, Aaron here. Welcome back to another video. So today I am off script. Normally I am on script, but today I decided why not just have some fun with it. Saves me time too. But for today, and I think tomorrow too, we will be talking about the upcoming artifact sets in the next 3.3 patch. If you don't know, there will be a new domain that will host, like I said, 2 new artifact sets. These 2 new artifact sets are called the Desert Pavilion Chronicle and the Flower of Paradise Lost. In this video, I will be talking about the former Desert Pavilion Chronicle, its implications in the game, who it's good on, by how much, and if it's even worth it. Let's just hop right into it because I have nothing else to say. And let's just start with an overview of the Desert Pavilion Chronicle. But before we continue on, if you do like this content, please like, comment, subscribe, normal stuff. Okay, now time for the overview. As with every artifact set, this new artifact set has a 2-piece and a 4-piece effect. The 2-piece effect increases anemo damage bonus by 15%, which is only rivaled by the 2-piece of Viridescent Venrir. However, unlike the Viridescent Venrir, it has a violently different 4-piece effect. If you do have the 4-piece, after a charged attack hits an opponent, the character wielding this artifact set will gain a normal charged and plunging attack damage bonus by 30%, and they will also gain a normal attack speed bonus by 10%, and both of these effects last for 10 seconds. This set obviously brings to mind the main DPS anemo characters that focus on normal charged and plunging attacks. Right now, there are only 3, Xiao, Heizou, and the upcoming Scaramouche. So let's take a look at these 3 anemo DPS characters, and we'll see how well they work with the new artifact set. As always, all of them are built at high yet reasonable investment, so you can go over, but it's quite hard. We'll be going over each set and their intricacies, when they're good and not as well. There's also chapters in the description for each section, as we'll be taking things step by step, starting with just their main source of damage and then adding on to it with supports, other sources of damage, stuff like that as we continue forward. So let's start with their main source of damage when using them as a main DPS with this set. In Xiao's case, it's obviously his plunging attacks, so we'll be putting all the investment there and only looking at those numbers. And then for Heizou and Scaramouche, we'll be only using their normal attacks. As always, I am going to be putting the numbers on screen too, so if you do want to see their exact amounts, it's going to be there. Let's start with Scaramouche. For both him and Xiao, I have tested like all of them, like almost every single possibility. I left out Echoes of the Offering because I didn't want to deal with that, and this is mainly just quick math to get a good feeling, and I'll go over things a lot more in a Scaramouche guide video, so make sure to look out for that if you really want to see every single thing. In any case, everything all across with all of his sets. For Scaramouche, I am using his signature weapon and Solar Pearl because I feel like those are the 2 that people are going to gravitate toward, and they just kind of seem like the best. As we can see, everything is pretty similar damage, except for a full Viridescent Venrir, which is a bit worse. It's not too bad. It would help him serve as more of a driver, but that's not really what you should be going for on him because his damage is kind of really good, so I would say just focus on his DPS capabilities. Pavilion seems to be absurdly strong on him, but it is on par with Shimenawa's in terms of damage output, which kind of sucks. In fact, Shimenawa's looks to be about 1.7% stronger, which does make a lot of sense because you are getting a lot more damage out of it, but you would think that the attack speed would help. Apparently not. I haven't taken into account swirl damage either, which Pavilion works really well with because they're able to just get off more and it gives him a bit more AoE damage. So that would put it a bit more in Pavilion's favor, but it's not going to be by much because you're not building into it. So from here, it looks like Pavilion is about equal in strength to Shimenawa's in just terms of normal attack damage, but each set has their own downside. Shimenawa's has the energy downside where it forces you to lose energy upon casting a skill, which kind of sucks, whereas Pavilion requires you to perform a charged attack, which is not very hard to do, and it doesn't screw with rotations, and it also allows you to actually use Scaramouche's burst. So while Shimenawa's is about 0.6 to 1.7% better, it is only a very minimal difference compared to set's downside. In this situation, damage-wise, Desert Pavilion surpasses every other option available other than, you know, Shimenawa's. For Xiao, we could see a similar situation. He's in a very similar boat as everything does similar damage. Pavilion is his second best option, but Vermilion is about 3.7% better with his signature weapon. But there are some caveats, which I need to mention, because similarly to the little debacle with Shimenawa's and Pavilion has less of a downside than Vermilion does. You may be like, why? It synergizes perfectly well with Xiao's burst. The thing is, it incentivizes longer burst durations, whereas Pavilion, you get a lot more up front. So if you don't go for an entire burst duration of Xiao's elemental burst, you're actually getting less damage out of it than if you were to just go Vermilion. So while it may be 3.7% better with his signature weapon, there can be cases where you just don't want to use that, or you just don't want to go that and would rather go Pavilion, so that way you can rotate better with shorter durations. It's a lot friendlier, I would say. I also calculated numbers with Blackcliff on Xiao, and for Blackcliff, Pavilion turns out to be the better option in the long term and short term, as it is 0.5% better in the former and also doesn't get better over time, which is the main drawback of Vermilion, since you need to stack up. I think this is definitely a better idea about which set is better for Xiao depending on weapon. So weapons that grant a high attack like Staff of Homa and Blackcliff are going to much rather prefer Pavilion, whereas weapons like the Deathmatch and his signature weapon that have more multipliers would much rather have the Vermilion hereafter. Now looking at Heizou, instead of comparing him to everything, I just compared him to what he's run with now. Maybe now you can run him with the 15% anima damage bonus and other 15% anima damage bonus, but Heizou's personal damage is very low. You could see compared to the other two, it is very low. So it's definitely more worth it to just build into his swirl damage, which is why I wanted to compare it. These are both with main DPS builds to just show the damage increase that his normal attacks will be getting. His personal damage increase is about 13.3% to 23%, which is really good. It is absurdly strong. However, like I said before, it does not include swirls. And the fact that Viridescent also buffs his entire team's damage output, it's most likely not going to net you a lot more damage, even if you just use his normal attacks. At this point, I would say it is debatable whether you want to go Viridescent or with a new Pavilion. But now let's see what happens when we add in everyone's elemental skills and bursts. First, let's take a look at Scaramouche and Xiao, mainly because neither of them really change. They have about the same damage proportions compared to one another. Nothing really happened. However, when we look at Heizou, we see something else. The difference is now more in favor of Viridescent, since his skill and burst count for a vast majority of his damage, making Pavilion less useful. Pavilion is about 5.7 to 11.6% better, at least damage-wise, but again, that doesn't account for swirls or his team's damage, which it gets major buffs with Viridescent. So at this point, Viridescent is straight up just better. Now, let's add in the other new character, Faruzan. We're going to be adding her at C6 and with her Ascension 4 buff. If you don't know, her Ascension 4 buff is basically a Shenhe buff on like a cooldown. It's just very similar to Layla's, except it works on animal damage procs, but like every so often. The flat damage bonus is also based on her base attack, so it's not great, if I'm being honest. Kind of not really worth anything, but it does help out a little bit. Anyways, let's look at the characters. First, let's just start with Heizou because nothing has changed. Barely anything has changed. It's similar to before with Scaramouche and Xiao. Like nothing has changed. But now let's look at Xiao. As we could see, Vermilion is now only 2.7% better than Pavilion with his signature weapon, but Pavilion is better with Blackcliff by about 0.1%, which basically makes them equal. Again, it just depends on how long you want to stay in his burst. Now for Scaramouche, we see something pretty weird. The damage difference between the two sets is only about 0.02% and 0.9%, which is basically nothing. It practically makes them equal when Faruzan is in the same team. That being said, this makes the substats for Vermilion, Pavilion, and Shimenawa's more important and impactful towards your damage than the set themselves, for both Scaramouche and Xiao. But now let's see what would happen if we put them in a decent team comp that can make them the best that they can be, except for Heizou in this situation, who I will talk about first as I only incorporated his swirls into the mix. The reason why I'm doing this is because nothing changed. Is barely anything changed. Heizou's Heizou. Just go figure, doesn't. Anyways, on to the actual characters of note. Let's start with Xiao. Xiao I paired with a Bennett and a Zhongli. Here we could see Xiao's best set is still Vermilion Hereafter. It is super strong, but not by much, and only if you have him use up his entire burst window. With the shorter durations of Bennett's burst and Faruzan's Animo Resistance Shred, it can just be straight up better to switch off of him after their damage increases disappear, in which case Pavilion would straight up be better. However, the difference is very minuscule, so just do whatever you want. Now for Scaramouche, I added in Yunjin and also Zhongli. In this situation, we see that Pavilion is finally straight up better by 2.1% to 6%, but only with Yunjin. This is because she grants a flat damage bonus on all of his normal attacks, which Faruzan does not do. While he does get less of a damage percent bonus on his normal attacks and a bit less base damage, he makes up for the base damage with Yunjin to the point where the extra attack speed just kind of does so much more for him. But that's only really with Yunjin. If you go with someone else, it's gonna be about the same situation. So what's the consensus on the new set? It seems okay. This set is mainly a set for Scaramouche, but it can be used as a good substitute for the main sets of Xiao and Heizou. It can be better in certain situations, but not dramatically better to the point where you have to pick it up. Other sets compete on par with it, and it can be better given certain situations, but it's just not a must pick up and can be easily worked around. For Heizou, you basically just don't want it. The amount of damage increase that you get from it is not enough to warrant the loss of team damage that the Viridescent Thread grants him to his team. It's only really good for a super buffed Heizou, like if you want to go Faruzan, Yunjin, and Zhongli like we did with Scaramouche. For Xiao, I would say it is his new best set, at least for a C0 Xiao. It is on par with his signature set, but does not need to ramp up, so you can make full use of it all the time. The Vermilion domain is also a terrible domain to farm in, as you're only farming there for Ayato's Best in Slot artifact set in the Echoes of the Offering and Xiao's in the Vermilion Hereafter. No one else can use those sets really reliably, and it seems like the steps down is just like about like 2% worse in total damage output and can sometimes be better depending on the situation, and it's like the similar situation with Xiao and Pavilion. So it really just seems like you don't want to go towards that domain. Now for Scaramouche, it is Scaramouche's most reliable set, technically not his best. It only becomes his best in slot with Yunjin, otherwise it is only on par or slightly worse than Shimenawa's. Now to some, the Shimenawa's downside or its passive can be scary, but if you just run a team of Favonius users, you're going to have enough energy to completely cover the downside, while Scaramouche is just off field. You don't even need to worry about funneling energy into him. It's barely a downside, that's what I'm trying to say. This domain just seems okay, but not really all too amazing, since this Animo set has equal replacements for its favored characters. It does not seem like a great set to farm for, but if you have a Xiao, I would say it's definitely more worth it to farm this set over his signature. It's not a great start to a domain, which is sad, though a lot of the domain's worth will instead have to ride on the shoulders of its neighboring set. But that is not for today's video. That is for the next video. So if you would like to see whether this domain is actually worth farming for, and if you want to see if the other set is actually good, then hit that subscribe button and hit the bell below. Make sure you're notified when it comes out. Anyways, tell me your thoughts on this set in the comments down below and whether or not you will be farming for it. But it's time for me to now get out of your hair. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye bye.